The airport was full of noise, with people rushing everywhere. Children cried, trolley wheels squeaked, and flight announcements echoed in every corner. It was just another busy day. Flight A908 was ready for takeoff. The crew stood near the gate, with bright smiles and perfect uniforms. Among them was Sana, a beautiful and confident air hostess. She walked like she owned the sky. With 5 years of flying experience, she believed she could read people just by looking at their shoes, clothes, or watch. Boarding first-class passengers. The announcer said. Sana stood near the entrance of the aircraft, welcoming the elite passengers. Men in suits, women in designer dresses. Everyone looked rich and stylish. Sana greeted them all with a warm smile and guided them to their seats. Suddenly, a man stepped forward. His jeans were old and dusty. His t-shirt had a faded print. His shoes looked like they had walked 1,000 miles. His hair was messy, and he carried a small backpack, not a fancy suitcase. His name was Rayhan. Sana's smile disappeared. She looked at him from head to toe. "Excuse me, sir," she said politely, but with a sharp tone. "Are you sure you're in the right line?" Rayhan gave a small nod. "Yes, first class." She raised an eyebrow. "Can I see your ticket?" He handed her the ticket without a word. She looked at it. Her face changed. It was real. Seat 1A, first class. But instead of apologizing, she whispered with a fake smile, "People like you don't usually sit here. This section is for first-class travelers." Rayhan didn't reply. He just gave a half smile and entered the plane. Inside, the aircraft. Sana couldn't hide her anger. "He looks like a beggar," she whispered to another crew member. "First class. Must be a mistake or some charity case." The other crew member shrugged, but no one stopped her. Rayhan sat quietly in his seat. He didn't look around. He didn't open the menu or call for water. He just sat, calmly staring out the window. Passengers walked past him with surprised faces. Some laughed silently. A child even asked his mother, "Mama, is he lost?" Sana walked to his seat and offered a drink. "Would you like something? Or maybe you're more used to tap water." Her sarcasm was sharp. Rayhan looked at her for a moment and replied softly, "Water is fine. Thank you." She walked away, rolling her eyes. "Trash in first class," she muttered under her breath. The plane began to fill. The seats were almost full, and the boarding was nearly complete. Suddenly, the cockpit door opened. The captain stepped out. He was tall, in full uniform, and walked with authority. The passengers looked at him, expecting an announcement, but instead, he walked straight to Rayhan's seat, and then he saluted. "Sir," the captain said with deep respect, "it's an honor to have you on board." The cabin became silent. Sana's mouth fell open. Her eyes widened. Rayhan slowly stood up and nodded. "Good to see you again, Captain," he replied. The captain smiled. "Still remember the cockpit?" Rayhan gave a quiet smile. "Hard to forget." Sana stood frozen. Other passengers whispered in confusion. "Is he a general? Was he a pilot? Who is this guy?" Sana felt heat rise in her face. Her heartbeat was loud. She remembered her words. Trash in first class. Was she wrong? No, she was wrong. She wanted to hide, but it was too late. The passengers had heard her. Some were already looking at her with judgment. The captain said one more thing before walking back. "If you need anything, Commander, just say the word, Commander." Now the whispers turned into clear curiosity. Rayhan sat back in his seat, calm, peaceful, as if nothing happened. But inside Sana, a storm had started. The plane was now in the sky, flying smoothly above the clouds. But inside the cabin, things were not so calm, especially for Sana. She stood at the back of the aircraft, holding a tray, but her hands were shaking. Her mind kept replaying that one moment, the captain saluting the trash man, and calling him Commander. "Who is he?" she whispered to herself. The other crew members were whispering too. One said, "Maybe he's a retired pilot." Another guessed, "Or maybe a military officer." But no one knew for sure. Passengers were also talking. Some were Googling him secretly, typing Commander Rayhan Airline or first-class passenger. Pilot salute, but nothing came up. He was a mystery. A calm, silent, powerful mystery. Meanwhile, in seat 1A, Rayhan sat still, looking out of the window. His face was calm, but his eyes were deep. Like he had seen many things, both good and bad. He reached into his bag and pulled out a small photo. It was old and slightly torn. In the photo, a team of men in uniforms, standing in front of a small aircraft, all smiling. Rayhan stared at it for a long time, lost in thought. Sana's memory. A flashback as she poured coffee for a business. Passenger Sana remembered something from her past. She was 19 years old, traveling alone on a train. She had seen a man wearing old clothes sit near her. Without thinking, she had covered her nose and moved her bag away. Then she loudly said, "People with bad smell shouldn't be in this compartment." The man looked at her with hurt in his eyes. He didn't say a word. That memory suddenly hurt her now. Have I always been this way? She thought. Do I always judge people by their clothes? She looked at Rayhan again. He was still holding that photo. Clue from the captain. Sana couldn't take it anymore. She walked toward the cockpit and gently knocked. The captain opened the door and smiled. "Everything okay, Sana, sir?" she said nervously. "That man in 1A, who is he?" The captain paused, then looked serious. "You don't know?" he asked. She shook her head. He lowered his voice. That's Commander Rayon's FRX Air Force. The man saved hundreds of lives in a war zone, flew a plane out of a burning airport, under missile fire. Sanaa's eyes widened. The captain continued. After that, he trained pilots. He was offered top positions in many airlines, but he chose to live a simple life. Why? She asked, shocked. Because he believes respect is not about the seat or the suit, it's about heart. Sana didn't know what to say. Her legs felt weak, the captain added. I called him today as a guest. He didn't want attention, he just wanted to fly quietly. But your behavior, it forced him to be noticed. Sana looked down. She had no excuse. Time for service. It was lunch. Time Sana had to serve meals in first class. Her hands trembled as she walked to Rayon's seat. Would you like chicken or pasta? She asked softly, avoiding his eyes. He looked up at her. His face was kind, not angry. Chicken, please, he said politely. She nodded and placed the tray in front of him. As she turned to leave, he said gently, you don't have to be afraid of me. She froze. He continued, you judged me by my clothes. I judged you by your words. We both made mistakes. She slowly turned back. I'm sorry, he smiled lightly. Sometimes it takes one flight to change the direction of our life. She walked away, her eyes watery. Mid-air disturbance suddenly. The cockpit door opened again. The co-pilot stepped out, holding his stomach. He looked pale. Captain, he said weakly, I think I'm having food poisoning. I can't sit in the cockpit. A moment of panic hit the crew. Sanaa's heart started racing. The captain turned to Rayon and asked, would you mind helping me for a while? Rayon stood up calmly. Of course. Gasps filled the cabin. A passenger was entering the cockpit tent. No one stopped him. He walked in with the confidence of a professional, and the door shut behind him. Back in the cabin, stood still, shocked. Did I just serve chicken to the man who is now flying the plane? She whispered. She watched the closed cockpit door with respect and guilt. Rayon's mystery had turned into awe. A viral moment begins. One of the business class passengers, who had filmed Sanaa's rude behavior earlier, uploaded the video with a caption, air hostess insults a war hero, calls him trash in first class. Within minutes, the video began to spread. People began commenting, disgusting behavior. This is why we should never judge a book by its cover. Commander, Rayon is a true legend. Sanaa's picture was now viral, but not in a good way, and she didn't even know yet. The sky outside was peaceful, but inside the cockpit of Flight A908, tension was building. Rayon sat in the co-pilot's seat, his hands gently moving over the controls. His face showed no fear, only focus. The captain looked relieved to have him there. It's like riding a bike, isn't it? The captain said with a small smile. Rayon nodded. Some things, you never forget. Behind the cockpit door, no one could see what was happening, but they all felt something had changed. Turbulence hit suddenly. The plane shook. The calm sky outside turned gray. A warning sound echoed through the aircraft. The captain grabbed the controls tightly. We're entering a thunderstorm. It wasn't on the radar. Lightning flashed through the windows. The passengers screamed. Babies cried. A woman clutched her husband's arm. Oxygen masks dropped from the ceiling. The cabin lights flickered. Everyone stay seated and wear your seatbelts. The head steward shouted, but the panic had already started. Sana breaks down. Sana stood frozen near the food trolley. The shaking plane made it hard to move. Her heart was pounding. Her hands were cold. She tried to speak but couldn't. She wanted to help, but fear gripped her body. For the first time in her flying career, she felt completely powerless. She fell into a seat and covered her face. Please, God, don't let this be my last flight, she whispered through tears. A passenger shouted, why is no one telling us what's happening? People were panicking. Some screamed. Others prayed. The crew looked to Sana, but she was shaking. And then, a calm voice came from the speaker. Rayon's voice. Ladies and gentlemen, the voice said, steady and strong. This is Commander Rayon Zafar. I'm assisting the captain. Please remain calm. We are trained for this. You are in safe hands. Silence followed. People looked at each other. Even crying, children stopped for a moment. There was something powerful in that voice. It felt like protection, like leadership, like hope. Sana slowly looked up. Her fear paused. That voice that had saved more than just a plane. It had saved her. Flashback. Rayon's passed inside the cockpit. Rayon kept his hands on the controls. His mind, however, went briefly to the past. Years ago, he had flown a military plane under enemy fire. His co-pilot had died mid-flight. His aircraft had lost one engine. The mission had failed. He was ordered to return, but on his way back, he saw a school under attack from above. He disobeyed orders and flew low, using flares to scare off the drones. He saved dozens of children. After that, he left the military. Quietly. No medals, no headlines, just silence. But today, the sky had called him again. Back in the cabin, the turbulence slowly settled. The plane still shook, but not as hard. Some passengers started clapping. He sounds like a real hero, said a man in business class. Maybe that's why the captain saluted him. Another said. Sana wiped her eyes and stood up. She fixed her hair and looked around. The passengers needed strength. She took a deep breath. And for the first time since takeoff, she didn't care about her pride. She just wanted to do her job right. Trouble Balat. That same moment, in the airport control room, officers were talking fast. Flight A908 is in unstable airspace. The co-pilot is down. Who's flying it? One officer read from the system. Rayan Zafar, former Air Force commander, certified. The room went quiet. Then we have nothing to worry about, someone said. Sanast, walking down the aisle to help a scared child. Sana saw Rayana's backpack still lying beside seat 1A. The small photo he was holding earlier had fallen. She picked it up gently. It showed Rayan younger, with a small group of children all in uniform, all smiling. On the back was written, "For the man who gave us freedom when no one else came." Tears filled Sana's eyes. He wasn't just a pilot. He wasn't just a passenger. He was a protector. A man who had given everything and asked for nothing. The captain's praised later. When the plane returned to normal flight, the captain made an announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank Commander Rayan for his assistance today. It is because of him that we are flying safe. We salute him." The cabin filled with claps. Loud, long, and full of respect. Some passengers stood up. One man said, "You saved us." Another added, "You didn't just fly the plane, you flew our hearts." Rayan stood quietly, smiled, and bowed his head. He didn't like attention, but this was not attention. It was honor. Cold reality for Sana. When the plane landed, everyone stood to leave. Smiles had returned. People took selfies. Some even tried to shake Rayan's hand. But then, a flight manager entered the plane. His face was serious. "Miss Sana," he said, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear, "please stay behind." Her heart dropped. The crew and passengers went silent again. "What's wrong?" she asked softly. He held up a phone. On the screen her video, calling Rayan trash, was playing. "Corporate office has seen this," he said. "You'll be receiving a formal notice." Sana looked at the floor. She felt shame burn inside her chest. Rayan, standing nearby, didn't say a word. She turned to him, her eyes red. I didn't know who you were." He looked into her eyes. "And if I was no one, would that make it okay?" She had no answer. The airplane had landed safely, but the storm was just beginning for Sana. She stood near the cabin door, as passengers exited, their eyes full of judgment. Some looked at her with disgust, some with pity. No one smiled at her. Not anymore. Behind her, Rayan stood near the cockpit, still calm, helping the captain shake hands with people leaving the flight. A little girl hugged him and said, "Thank you, hero, uncle." Sana's chest tightened. She had once called that same man trash in first class. Now, the world called him a hero. After the landing, the crew gathered in the staff lounge at the airport. A manager walked in with a paper in his hand. He cleared his throat. "Sana Corporate has reviewed the situation. Due to unprofessional behavior caught on video, your status is under review." Sana's legs weakened. She sat down slowly. One of her teammates tried to whisper something nice, but Sana just nodded silently. She deserved this, and she knew it. The manager added, "You're suspended until further notice. Please hand in your badge." Sana opened her crew jacket, removed her ID, and placed it on the table. She didn't cry, not this time. Rayan's goodbye, the baggage area. Rayan stood quietly, holding his small bag. Sana walked toward him, her face pale but steady. She didn't know what to say, but she spoke anyway. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I treated you like dirt." He looked at her calmly. "It's not just me, Sana. You treat anyone who doesn't wear a suit like they don't matter." She blinked. It was true. Every day on flights, she smiled at the rich and ignored the rest. He continued, "Maybe now, you'll see the world a little differently." And with that, he turned and walked away. No anger, no revenge, just truth. The video goes viral within 24 hours. The video had over 2 million views. Comments flooded in. "She judged a hero. Unbelievable. Commander Rayan deserves a national award. The hostess should be banned for life." Sana didn't open social media. She couldn't bear to see her face in headlines like, "Air hostess humiliates war hero, instant karma mid." She turned off her phone and sat in silence, alone. Back at home, Sana's home was quiet. Too quiet. Her mother entered the room with tea. "What happened, Beta? You haven't spoken since you came back." "I lost my job," Sana whispered her. Mother sat beside her. "What for?" Sana looked away. "For being cruel?" Her mother sighed. "It's never too late to change." Sana nodded, but she didn't believe it yet. Meanwhile, Rayan's life. Rayan walked into a hospital quietly. He wasn't there for a checkup. He was there to volunteer. He met with children who were sick, most of them poor, abandoned, or disabled. Rayan visited them every week. One of the nurses smiled and said, "You never miss a visit." He nodded. "They give me more strength than I give them." A rainy realization one evening. It rained heavily. Sana stood by her window, watching people on the street. One man gave his umbrella to an old lady and walked away, getting soaked himself. Sana felt something shift inside her. That man didn't have much, but still gave what he could. Just like Rayan, just like the people she always ignored, she decided she couldn't sit in shame anymore. She had to do something. A new beginning the next morning. Sana walked into a local charity center. I want to help, she told the woman at the counter. The woman smiled, surprised. Any experience, I know how to serve people, Sana replied. Now I want to do it from the heart. She started with small things. Folding clothes, serving food, helping children with schoolwork. Her soft hands became tired. Her expensive perfume was replaced by kitchen smells and baby wipes, but for the first time in years she felt human. A familiar face returns one evening, while organizing books at the charity center. She looked up and there he was. Ryan. He stood near the doorway, watching silently. She froze. I didn't expect to see you here, he said. She wiped her hands and stood. I'm not doing this to impress anyone. I know, he replied. There was a long pause. She looked at him. Do you believe people can change? He nodded. Not by words, but by actions. And have I changed? He started. You've started. That's what matters. Surprise offer a week later. Sana received a letter from the airline. It wasn't just a letter, it was an offer. You were invited to reapply as a flight attendant. Under one condition, complete 1 month of community service and a professional behavior training course. Sana held the paper with shaking hands. It wasn't just a job. It was a second chance. She looked up at the sky and whispered, thank you. It had been 3 weeks since Sana started her work at the charity center. Her nails were no longer polished, and her skin had become rough from hard work. But for the first time in her life, she felt truly respected, not for her looks, not for her uniform, but for her actions. Every day, she served food, cleaned floors, helped children with homework, and folded blankets for the homeless. She listened to stories from broken families, crying mothers, and lonely elders. Their pain opened her heart in ways no flight training ever had. And still, Commander Rayon visited the center once a week, silently watching her from a distance. He never said much, but she knew he was observing her, testing her. A letter. That meant everything one evening, as she sat under a flickering bulb writing thank you cards to donors. A volunteer walked over with an envelope. It's for you, she said. Sana's hands shook as she read the sender's Sky Air corporate office. She opened it slowly and read aloud. Dear Miss Sana, after review and proof of your community service, we are offering you a probationary return to Sky Air as a junior flight attendant. Your performance will be closely monitored. One mistake will end your employment permanently. Welcome back. Tears rolled down her cheeks. She wasn't being praised. She wasn't being forgiven completely, but she was being given a second chance. And that was enough. Returned to uniform the next morning. She stood in front of the mirror wearing her new uniform. It was different from her past uniforms, simpler, with a different badge. No senior status, no shiny wings. Just a name tag and a probation tag. But she looked at herself differently now. Before, she saw beauty. Now, she saw growth. Her first flight back, her first flight, was a domestic trip short. Just 2 hours. Sana boarded early with the crew. She wasn't leading this time. She was just assisting. As she served water to the passengers, she noticed people weren't smiling at her like they used to. Some looked at her with curious eyes. Isn't she the one from the viral video? She kept her head down and worked quietly. No fake smiles, no attitude, just honest service. Halfway through the flight, she helped a crying baby, gave her own scarf to an old woman who was shivering, and offered tissues to a man who had just lost his job. This time every action was real. A familiar voice after the flight. She stepped off the plane and walked into the crew lounge. As she sipped water, someone walked in behind her. Not bad. The voice said, She turned. It was Rayon, now in full uniform, standing tall as the newest guest flight supervisor, a position offered to retired pilots and decorated officers too. Observe cabin performance. You're evaluating me now, she asked nervously. He smiled slightly. I'm not here to punish you. I'm here to see if you're ready. The real test. A week later, Sana received a message. Report to Flight A137, first class cabin, supervisor on board. She packed her bag, heart pounding. This wasn't just a flight, it was the real test. When she entered the aircraft, she froze. Rayan was sitting in the front row again. This time, in uniform, badge visible. Passengers boarded one by one. Suddenly, a man wearing dirty clothes and carrying a plastic bag entered. First class. Some passengers looked confused. A rich woman whispered loudly, Is this economy? But before anyone could say anything rude, Sana walked toward the man with a warm smile. Welcome aboard, sir. Let me help you with your seat. She took his bag gently and guided him to his place. Would you like water or juice? She asked. He looked surprised. They told me someone might treat me badly. Sana smiled, this time from her heart. Not anymore. A familiar feeling later, a baby started crying in the back. Without being told, Sana rushed over, picked up the child, gently, and rocked her while the mother rested. Another passenger dropped a tray. Sana cleaned it herself without calling anyone else. All the while, Rayan observed, his notebook stayed in his lap. He didn't write a single thing down. In-flight announcement as the plane neared its destination. Rayan stood up and walked toward the center of the cabin. He took the intercom and made a short announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, Today's flight was observed by a special supervisor. I want to tell you that sometimes people fall, but what matters is how they stand back up. Today, I witnessed a woman who once made a mistake and chose not to hide, but to learn and change. That is not weakness, that is courage. Let's remember, kindness is not about job titles. It's about being human. The passengers clapped. Some looked at Sana with fresh respect. Sana didn't smile to enjoy the praise. She simply looked down grateful. After the flight, Rayan walked beside her as they exited. You did well, he said. Thank you, she replied quietly. He stopped and looked at her. You've earned something more important than your job back. She looked up what he smiled. Yourself? Sana was back in the air, but the skies felt different now. Her hand still held trays. Her voice still announced seatbelt instructions. Her smile still welcomed passengers. But inside her, something had changed. She no longer flew for the compliments. She flew to serve with humility. Even though she had passed her probation flight, whispers still followed her through every airport hallway. That's the one who insulted the war hero, right? She's only here because of sympathy. She doesn't deserve to wear that uniform again. Sana heard it all, but she didn't fight it, because they were right about one thing she did mess up. Now, she just wanted to prove one thing, that people can change. Cleaning the mess inside. Sunday, Sana visited her childhood neighborhood. The streets looked smaller now. The same tea stall, the same broken swing, the same uncle with the same radio. She passed by an old building. On the wall was a poster of herself from years ago, smiling, confident, in uniform. Someone had scribbled on it. Fake. She stood in front of the poster for a long moment, then walked into the building. It was a school she once studied in. She offered to volunteer. I want to help, she told the head. I want to give something back. The teacher hesitated. Are you doing this for the cameras? Sana shook her head. I'm doing it for the mirror. The flight with no applause. Her next flight had no drama, no turbulence, no emergencies, just quiet service. Still, some passengers ignored her. One refused to take water from her hand. I don't want help from people who fake respect, the woman said coldly. Sana stood silently, nodded, and walked away. She didn't argue. She didn't cry. Later, she placed a blanket on that same passenger while she was sleeping, gently covering her feet. Because now, Sana didn't serve people for approval, she did it because it was right. Rayan's quiet lesson. After that flight, Rayan met her outside the airport. He wore simple clothes, no badges, no titles. They sat on a bench quietly. You looked stronger today, he said. She gave a tired smile. Then why does it still hurt? He looked at her gently. Because you're healing, and healing is slow. The world forgets success quickly, but it remembers failure forever. Sana asked. So how do I make them see me differently? He answered. You don't. You keep walking until they stop looking back. The volunteer shift. One evening, Sana went to the hospital where Rayan volunteered with sick children. She wore a plain dress, tied her hair back, and worked with the staff. She helped feed patients, cleaned toys, and read stories to little cancer patients with no hair and big eyes. A small girl named Heba asked her auntie, why are you helping us? Sana sat beside her. Because I used to only care about myself. Now, I want to care about others. The girl held her hand. Then you are a good auntie now. Those words healed more than any online apology ever could. A surprise invitation 1 week later. Sana received an email. Subject, speaker, invitation aviation ethics workshop. She was invited to speak at a training session for new flight attendants. The topic? The power of second chances. Sana stared at the screen. She was once the example of failure. Now, they wanted her to teach. She called Rayan. I'm not ready. He simply replied, you are. The speech that wasn't a speech. The auditorium was full. Fresh recruits sat in neat rows, notebooks ready. Sana walked to the stage. I'm not here as your teacher, she began. I'm here as your warning. She told them everything, how she judged a man by his clothes, how she insulted a hero, how the whole world saw her mistake. I was called trash by strangers online. I lost my job, my pride, my smile. She paused. But I gained something better, a conscience. And that was only possible because one man chose to forgive me instead of destroy me. She looked at the back of the hall where Rayan stood, arms crossed, watching silently. I failed once, she said, but I refused to stay down. The room was silent. Then came soft claps, then loud ones. No cheers, just respect. A secret offer. Later that evening, as the audience left, Rayan approached her. You speak better than you serve, he teased lightly. She laughed. For the first time in days, then he handed her an envelope. What's this? She asked. Open it. Inside was an official letter. Sky Air Flight Leadership Program, Acceptance. You have been selected for advanced training for cabin leadership and emergency handling. Sana looked up, shocked. I didn't even apply. You didn't need to, Rayan said. Your story did. Sana stood in front of the mirror, dressed in her new Sky Air leadership training uniform, navy blue with a silver pin over her chest that read lead trainee. The uniform felt heavier than usual, not because of the fabric, but because of the journey it took to wear it again. From the day she called Rayon trash in first class, to now, the woman in the mirror had changed. Her eyes weren't filled with pride anymore. They held something deeper understanding. But her journey wasn't complete yet. One final test remained, and this time, the real challenge wasn't flying a plane. It was facing the past that refused to forget. Flight assigned, leadership. Observation: Sana was assigned a flight from Karachi to Dubai. Flight A774. A packed international flight with over 250 passengers. But this time Sana was not just a regular cabin crew member. She was the lead attendant in training, responsible for supervising crew behavior, emergency responses, and most importantly handling passengers. As she boarded, she reviewed her notes one last time. Rayan wasn't with her today. She was on her own. The passenger with a memory. The flight began boarding. Passengers entered, one after another, settling into their seats. But then a man stepped in. Middle-aged, sharp suit, expensive watch, cold eyes. He stopped in the aisle. When he saw Sana Yu, he said, loud enough for others to hear, "I remember your face. You're the hostess who insulted the war hero, right?" Sana's heart sank. But she didn't look away. "Yes, sir," she replied softly. "That was me," he scoffed. "And now you're in a leadership role. Sky Air must be desperate." Other passengers turned their heads. Sana stood still, calm. "I'm here to do my job, sir. Please let me know if you need anything." He didn't reply, just rolled his eyes and sat down. The whispers started again. "She's that girl. Wasn't she suspended? I thought she was fired." Sana kept her head down and continued helping passengers, but inside it hurt. More than turbulence, more than suspension, because even though she had changed, her past was still flying with her. Trouble in the air halfway through the flight. The crew faced a kitchen problem. The meal warmers failed, and passengers were expecting hot dinner. The junior attendant panicked. "What do we do? They're going to complain?" The crew looked at Sana. She took a deep breath. "Switch to cold meal protocol. Add fresh juice, offer a fruit cup with it, and explain the truth calmly and clearly." The team obeyed. One by one, they served the food. Some passengers grumbled, but no one shouted. Sana went personally to the business class section and explained, with grace, "I understand your concern, sir. But instead of hiding the issue, we wanted to be transparent and serve you with honesty." The cold meal situation was saved. The younger crew watched her with respect. The cry that broke silence an hour later. A baby started crying, loud, non-stop. Passengers began to groan. "Can't she keep that baby quiet? This is supposed to be a peaceful flight." Sana didn't wait. She walked straight to the mother, a young woman, traveling alone, and said kindly, "May I help?" She took the baby gently, rocked her, and sang a soft lullaby. The baby stopped crying in less than a minute. The mother's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you. No one else even looked at me." Sana smiled. "We're all flying through something, ma'am. Some of us just need a hand." The airport was quiet in the early morning, just before the rush. Sana walked through the crew entrance with her head high, not with pride, but with peace. Her badge now read lead cabin attendant. She had come a long way from being the girl who judged. To the woman who understood, today was special. It was her first international flight as a full lead. And something else made it more meaningful. Commander Rayan would be flying with her, again not as a mystery passenger, not as a supervisor, but as co-pilot. They were now on the same flight crew. Two people, one sky. A full circle moment. Flight A990. Dubai to London. The aircraft was large. The seats were full. Passengers from different countries boarded with their luggage and hopes. Sana stood at the entrance with a calm smile. She didn't fake it anymore. "Good morning, sir. Welcome aboard." "Hello, ma'am. Enjoy your flight." She greeted every person, the same way, rich or poor, dressed in suits or sandals. Each person got her full respect, and just before the doors were about to close, she turned to see Rayan entering the cockpit. He wore his full Skyer pilot uniform now. Their eyes met briefly, no words, just a soft nod. A flight like no other. The flight took off smoothly. Sana supervised the crew and checked passenger comfort. In business class, an elderly man had trouble with his seat. Sana gently fixed it and even offered her own pillow. In economy, a teenager traveling alone looked nervous. Sana spoke to her, softly, offering headphones and asking about her favorite music. Meanwhile, Rayan managed the cockpit with his usual calm. Occasionally, the captain handed him control, trusting him completely. This wasn't just a flight, it was a test of pest, just in the air, but within themselves. A familiar face returns halfway through the journey. Sana noticed a woman staring at her. The woman stood and walked toward her. "You're that girl from the video," the woman said. Sana nodded. "Yes, I am." The woman crossed her arms. "You judged that hero? Why should I trust you with my safety?" For a moment, the cabin grew quiet, but Sana didn't flinch. She looked the woman in the eye and said softly, "Because I've walked through the fire that video created. I didn't ask for forgiveness. I earned it step by step, flight by flight. You don't have to trust me, but I promise, I will protect you anyway." There was silence. Then, the woman simply said, "Fair enough," and returned to her seat. The final hurdle as the plane flew over Turkey. The captain announced light turbulence. Sana calmly walked down the aisle. Suddenly a passenger stood up and collapsed. Panic spread fast. Sana ran to him. A young man, barely 30, not breathing right. Call for medical help on board, she ordered. A doctor on board came forward. Sana worked alongside him, keeping the area clear, holding oxygen, monitoring the man's pulse. The man opened his eyes after 5 minutes, weak but alive. The doctor said, "She saved him. Quick action." Voice from the cockpit then rang. Voice came over the speaker. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've faced a small medical emergency, but the passenger is now stable. Please remain calm and seated. I also want to thank our lead cabin attendant, Miss Sana, for her bravery and quick decision. She didn't just fly this flight, she carried it." People clapped. Even the woman from earlier stood and joined the applause. But Sana didn't react. She just looked out the window, her eyes quiet, her heart full. Landing with honor, the plane landed in London safely. Passengers disembarked with smiles. Waving at the crew, one elderly passenger said to Sana, "I saw the old video, and I saw the new you. Keep flying. This world needs more people like the one you've become." Another whispered, "You remind me that people can truly change." Sana said nothing, just folded her hands politely and bowed her head. The honor she didn't expect as the crew stepped into the airport terminal. They were greeted by Skyer executives holding certificates. Rayan stood beside them. An official handed Sana a sealed envelope and said, "Today's flight was observed by international staff. We're proud to present you with Skyer's highest honor in cabin leadership." Inside was a certificate that read, "For rising after the fall, for choosing dignity over defense, for becoming not just a flight leader, but a life leader. Skyer Goldwing Award." Sana, tears touched her lashes. She turned toward Rayan. He stepped forward and saluted her. This time she saluted back.